Welcome to the Experience Better video podcast series. I'm Josh Beekler, and with me today, Jeff Gossman, who looks taller on me on the screen, was just because he's sitting in a higher stool. So I don't know why
you tell yourself what you have to.
But anyway, we're going to talk about a little Husker football today and some injury news. So we knew before week 1 that Barrett Pickering tweaked a hip flexor, and now we're going on the third game. We haven't seen him yet, and he's not even in the depth chart this week. So what's the deal with hip flexor injuries? I mean, why is this taking so long to recover from?
It's actually something we see a lot of in the clinic, especially this time of year with football. The biggest thing with any kind of hip flexor injury that you see is people re-aggravate them. It turns into more of a chronic nagging injury. Typically, people always ask, how long is this going to take to recover? And I usually leave it pretty open-ended because it's very hard to give a definitive answer there.
Right.
Typically you're looking 6 to 8 weeks. So.
Yeah. But and where the hip flexor is, kind of makes it even a little bit tougher yet.
Yes.
You can't really immobilize it or really allow it to rest. Like if it was an ankle or a further out, a further distal, more into your extremity, it gets used basically with every step, either in as a facilitator or an antagonist. Stopping a motion and essentially getting stretched every time you take a step. Anytime you sit up, you stand up, you sit down, you try to jump, you try to do anything, in which he's having to do a lot of.
Yeah.
So
that's the biggest thing is with a lot of these guys, they're high performing athletes. That muscle has been asked to put huge loads on it, especially as a kicker, for example.
Right.
He's trying to make these big kicks, especially for distance, those explosive movements. As it's contracting, it's putting a lot of force on it. But then also, even as he's running down on the kickoff, people don't think about that. Every time you extend back, that muscle has to slow down the leg, and that's why like you said, you just see these turn into more of a nagging injury. People start to feel better, they'll start jogging, but then as soon as they try sprinting, a lot of times they re-aggravate it. But even as far as wraps go, some people will wrap them, they'll put a compression sleeve on. It's difficult. It's such a big muscle and it's so deep that you're not really able to do anything to really give yourself good symptom relief there other than rest. Rest, ice, compression, the old Rice principles are about the best thing you can do for one of these, but essentially resting it is. So,
any other modalities that we treat hip flexor strains for in the clinic here?
A lot of times it's a lot of stretching. Of course you'll see your typical, your ultrasound, your electrical stimulation, ice. Ice is probably the most effective. Some people like heat beforehand to get it stretched out, but with those, you get mixed results. Ultimately, like I was saying before, gentle stretching and strengthening in a pain-free manner is best, and then slowly returning them to sport. The education component is huge. As they're coming back, letting them know, I always tell people, as soon as you start to feel pain, that's your ceiling right there.
Yep.
If you try pushing into that pain, you're going to re-aggravate it, set yourself back another couple weeks. Next thing you know, you're missing the whole season.
So, unfortunately, Husker Nation, I don't think we can really look forward to getting him back anytime real soon. Like you said, it's going to be something that easily tweaked, easily re-aggravated, especially where it's at in his body and what he does on the team.
Yeah.
So.
People don't appreciate the kickers until they're not there.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
So I guess we'll end on that sour note for the day, and thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.